Deputy Clare Daly, please.
Taoiseach, our naval service is in meltdown. For the first time in the history of the state, it's not able to fulfil the core function of sea fisheries protection. The unprecedented situations of ships not being able to put out to sea didn't just happen last week. It also happened over the summer. And now that these issues are in the public domain, because the men and women of our defence forces are simply not going to put up with it any longer, rather than deal honestly with the chronic understaffing, exhausted, overworked crews are actually now being bullied into going out in unsafe conditions to give the illusion that we have a functioning navy. Ships that would routinely have crews of 44 are being told to go out with 34. We had the spectacle yesterday of threatening emails being sent out directing crews that notice for short-term relief no longer applied. You had to be ready to go out whenever. That email was sent out and it was rescinded. And to add insult to injury, the Chief of Staff then tells us that there's no crisis, that the weekly hemorrhaging of expensive, experienced, trained staff is all about pay. Well, pay does have something to do with it, but you know what also has something to do with it? The chronic mismanagement of our defence forces that has been going on over the past number of years, and the move in the direction of vanity, prestige projects to cosy up to the EU military elite. We have a fully trained, fully resourced crew operating in the military exercise, not a search and rescue, the military exercise that is Operation Sophia. We've a costly new 9th vessel on the way when we don't have the crews for 8, and our defence forces families are living on the breadline. And to cover up for that shortage, personnel on a weekly basis are being bullied into finding a way around the minimum crewing numbers of 37. They're being press-ganged after a 4-week tour of duty to go back out on another ship. And you talk about the defence forces being family friendly. How in God's name could any woman or man put up with that? Even when they get the 37 on the cruise, they're often going out with unskilled staff, not enough comms op to maintain watches in the radio cabins, not enough engine room monitors, so the ship just sits there to give the pretence that we have a navy. It is an absolute disgrace. Taoiseach, given the hierarchy of the Defence Forces' response to the crisis, can you express confidence in the Chief of Staff? Is it not now time that we should suspend our involvement in Operation Sophia, bring home our crews and allow them to do the job that they were set up to do, to protect our sea fisheries and coastal waters?
Thank you,
Deputy, if I was a member of the Defence Forces and if I was in the Naval Service listening to you now, I would be surprised, to say the least, to hear somebody in this House calling for the Naval Service personnel to be brought home from the Mediterranean to focus on what they were trained to do and what they're there for, which is fisheries protection. Fisheries protection is not the limit of what we ask our Defence Force personnel in the Naval Service to do. You may not be, but I am very proud of the decisions that the government made to send ships to the Mediterranean, and I am a lot more proud of how our Defence Force personnel have responded to those challenges. We have taken over 17,000 people out of the water, many of them children that wouldn't be alive today if it hadn't been for the professionalism and the intervention of our Naval Service in the Mediterranean. We have shifted out of pragmatism from a bilateral relationship in the Mediterranean with the Italian Coast Guard to an EU collective effort under Operation Sophia, whereby Ireland has made it absolutely clear that the role that we play in Operation Sophia is a humanitarian search and rescue one, and not an offensive or war-going capacity. And we have been asked to stay there because of our expertise in relation to search and rescue. So when you try to twist the truth in relation to the role that Irish Defence Forces, proud men and women who are saving lives on a weekly basis, are doing in the Mediterranean to try and make a point on pay, then I don't believe that many in the Defence Forces, and in particular in the Naval Service, will appreciate the way in which you are making a case as you see for them. There are challenges, of course, in terms of recruitment and retention, which is why we've asked the Public Service Pay Commission to look at that issue as regards the Defence Forces, which of course also includes the Naval Service. But just to be clear, the current strength of the Naval Service is just over 1,000 personnel and is approximately 92% of its establishment, which is 1,094. Those figures are not any different to figures in the last number of years in terms of the number of personnel in our Naval Service. Yes, many of our Naval Service get targeted by the private sector because they are talented, motivated people. And so recruitment and retention is, of course, an ongoing issue. But let me reassure the House, there are no safety compromises here in terms of decisions that are being made at an operational level by the flag officer or indeed the Chief of Staff. And no ship will go to sea if there are any safety questions in relation to the crew.
Deputy Daly.
That the proud men and women of the naval services will be much more surprised to hear the nonsense that you have just spewed than the points that I made at the start. I specifically said I was not talking about pay, that the roots in the crisis in our defence forces, and it is a crisis admitted to me by personnel, serious personnel in FOIs over the course of the summer, is because of mismanagement at the top levels, in my opinion, at the level of Chief of Staff, which I asked you to comment on. That you went off on a tangent talking about Operation Pontus when I specifically asked about Operation Sophia, which, interestingly enough, in 82 days has rescued less than half the people that the Samuel Beckett rescued in 12 days. It is not a search and rescue operation. You would do well to read the letter by MSF which appeared in the papers today. Our Defence Forces personnel are sick of being patronised. People with families are being browbeaten back into duty only after coming back from doing a term. Are you aware of this situation? Do you not think that that's worthy of comment? Are you honestly saying that the only reason people are leaving is because of pay? That these issues are not an issue? Because I'll tell you one thing, if you actually believe that, well then we're even in bigger trouble than I thought we were.
To respond, Deputy Daly, I would be profoundly uncomfortable if what I thought I heard was you saying that the Chief of Staff was guilty of mismanagement.
I firmly believe that the Defence Forces are being mismanaged at top level, and I asked the Taoiseach for his opinion on whether he had confidence in the Chief of Staff.
That's fine, but a general accusation is one thing, but an accusation targeted at an identifiable person outside the House who cannot defend themselves here is not in order. Not for the first time
the Deputy has targeted individuals who don't have the capacity to defend themselves in this House. I have absolute confidence in the Chief of Staff of the Defence Forces. I know him well and have worked with him as a Minister for Defence and have on many occasions visited Naval Headquarters in Haulbowline with him and with other members of his management team and staff. The point that I made is that yes, there are recruitment and retention issues. Some of those issues, I think, are linked to pay and an economy that now can offer alternatives to people in the Defence Forces, and clearly that is happening and people are being targeted because of the skill set that they have. And we, as a government, are responding to that by looking at that question in detail, and when we get recommendations on it, those recommendations will come to government. But I cannot allow in this House the kind of accusations that you are making against an individual who is, in my view, doing an exceptional job under difficult circumstances for the Defence Forces as Chief of Staff, and I think it is regrettable that you've chosen to target an individual in that way.